Now this is the Dragon Ball Super that fans have been waiting for a very long time, all the way up until this point when Dragon Ball Super was announced. This is what we wanted to see. So without wasting any more time, let's get straight into this episode. So let's just start off with the plot. So pretty much we have two things going on in this episode. The first part is we're looking at Trunks' future, and we're seeing that his world is under attack, very similar to what we had seen in the history of Trunks, very similar to what we have seen with him in his flashbacks and when he went to his time. And, you know, his world is being destroyed once again, and this time we're seeing a lot of demonic presences that are taking place. And interestingly enough, he's running away, and this time he's going towards some basement that Bulma's actually hiding into, and you could actually see that Bulma has actually developed fuel just enough for Trunks to go back in time for 1 full year. So they're exiting the basement because obviously they're being under attack, and obviously Trunks is going to do everything he can to save his mother, but Bulma is grabbed somehow and there's an entire huge explosion, and it seems like Bulma's dead. Some people I'm seeing on Twitter are speculating that there might be a slim chance that she's still alive, but I just cannot see how Bulma could have survived in that circumstance because of the fact that that explosion was so huge and she's just a regular human. Like, if you could say maybe a person like Krillin or Yamcha maybe can survive something like that because they have like an abnormal body, but Bulma, a person who's never really been a fighter, I cannot see it, guys. And if they do bring her back somehow, it would probably be with the advent of Dragon Balls of some means or somehow. So we move on from that. Trunks is obviously in a very depressed state because of what had happened, and he finds Mai, and Bulma actually, before she passed, or you know, before whatever happened to her, she gave her fuel to Trunks, and Trunks is rushing over to find Mai. Now he finds Mai. You know, they were talking, you could see them hiding in the basement once again. Trunks is clearly depressed, he cries, and then they realize that they have to actually go back to the present. So what happens again? Typical Dragon Ball, they do something to force the characters out of the situation by forcing another attack, and we see Mai and Trunks walking around. You see the demonic presence again, and obviously Mai knows that Trunks has to go back to the past, so she tells him, alright, I'm gonna hold him off with her little shotgun. I thought that was a fail from the beginning, because let's just be honest here, guys. I mean, a shotgun in this world of Dragon Ball, that's not gonna cut it. So Mai tries to stall for Trunks while, you know, right after, you know, Trunks did like this amazing combo with like shooting energy blast with his sword. I thought that was an amazing sequence. I didn't know why he didn't go Super Saiyan. I thought that would have made the scene a little bit more epic, but you know, you saw Trunks basically charging out and, you know, doing everything he could, and next thing you know, obviously he's being knocked around. He's powerless to do anything. Mai does what's best for her and Trunks for the future, and she basically sacrifices her life to try and get Trunks to go to the past, and in doing so she's trying to stall against this abnormal creature, and she fails in the process. So what happens? Trunks is depressed, and that's pretty much the story of his future. Now I wanted to start off with his story more. I don't want to narrate too much in this episode, but then we move on to the present, and pretty much it's the complete opposite side of the story, where we're seeing, you know, Goku and Piccolo having a cabbage race to see who could pluck the most cabbages at the most amount of time. And actually Goten, interestingly enough, he actually wanted to join in too, but Chi-Chi actually tells him that he has to study. I find this really interesting because this is kind of showing us that Chi-Chi's a lot more similar to what she was with Gohan, in the sense that she wants Goten to study too, and this was very different because from what we saw in Dragon Ball, it kind of seemed like Chi-Chi was kind of trying to prep up Goten to be more of a fighter, or being more open to him fighting, but I guess Goku being around obviously changes that. So we see that once again. Krillin comes by, he tells Goku and pretty much everybody that, you know, Vegeta and is pretty much training with Whis. Goku obviously being excited, he goes over, they have lunch, and pretty much Goku gives Beerus a cabbage as, you know, like a souvenir for coming over. So you can look at those two sides of Dragon Ball and you can see that one story is completely lighthearted and, you know, Goku's just wanting to train, having a little fun race with Piccolo, whereas we're seeing two people close to Trunks who are dying in the other means. So let's move on to the other aspect. Sorry for all the narration, but I had to narrate this one. So we go on to the action sequences here, and I think the only real action sequence that we saw in this episode would have to be near the end of the episode, where we saw Trunks basically going up against Black Goku and this demonic presence. And we're seeing him shooting like those energy blasts with the sword. I don't think we've seen that before in Dragon Ball. We've seen him use the sword, but we haven't seen him actually use energy blasts with the sword. And for me, for those of you who are aware, this completely reminds me of Dragon Ball Z Legacy of Goku 2, because that was actually one of Trunks' attacks on that game. So I thought that was a really awesome sequence. The animation looked really good in this episode. I don't really think I can name any sequences where it looked bad. I mean, there was the artwork, you know, and the design might have been a little bit off-putting it for a few sequences with, you know, with Beerus, Whis, and Goku and Vegeta when they were on the planet, when they were eating their ramen. I thought that was a weird sequence because they did look kind of smushed in their faces, but that's more so artwork than animation. The animation was on point. I wish every episode of Dragon Ball Super actually looked like this. I thought it was great, and I'm actually curious to see what you guys think about that. But for the action and the animation, there's really nothing to barge at here. Obviously, they're saving up a lot of the action sequences for the next episode where we're seeing, you know, Trunks looking like he's going to come back, but I'll talk about that more in a second. So that was pretty much a clear view there. So moving on to the interesting details of this episode. I obviously noticed the first thing with the new intro of Dragon Ball Super, where we saw Black Goku and, you know, the Supreme Kai of Universe 6 on the actual, you know, intro. I thought that was interesting too. And they also brought Mai, which is kind of causing me to think some things about Mai, which I'll say more in my summary, because I'm starting to really question what really happened to Mai. But that's another conversation for another day. And in addition, I also noticed, credit to Herms for pointing out, that Trunks mentions that Black Goku can read his ki when he was hiding with Mai in that capsule core basement. And I found that interesting because if Black Goku can sense Trunks' ki, how does this make sense considering the fact that at this point of the series, Trunks should know how to suppress his energy? And this is actually a complete contradiction from what we saw early in Dragon Ball Z when Trunks first arrived, because when Trunks first arrived, pretty much what made him interesting is that he was suppressing his ki for you know, Frieza and the soldiers, so they pretty much couldn't even detect him. So when Trunks is saying he can sense his ki, I don't know if it's a different type of energy manipulation, how Black Goku can just, you know, key in on him or can just sense his energy, period. But I found that was kind of weird considering the Z Fighters are so aware of how to, you know, manipulate their ki at this point. And I also wanted to point out another interesting detail I also noticed too with, you know, the Omni King. Now, when Goku and Vegeta were over on Beerus's planet, Beerus was mentioning the fact that the Omni King is greater than anybody in the world in pretty much of a sense. And I found that also interesting how Beerus mentions that the Omni King actually destroyed 18 universes, but it was actually cut down to 12. And I think that's kind of cool, but the interesting thing about this is that Beerus is mentioning that the Omni King is greater than anyone in the world, but he doesn't necessarily fight. So this is telling me that the Omni King probably has some sort of original power in some sense, that he doesn't really necessarily have to train. He's just what he is. He's just like a presence. And I thought that's kind of changing you in the sense of that he's not really going to join them in fighting because he's just super powerful. He doesn't need to train. He doesn't need to power up. He is what he is, you know. So, you know, we've talked about the artwork. We talked about all these things here. The other thing that I always mention in my reviews is the memorable moments. Now, this is going to be kind of sad because I haven't felt sad about a Dragon Ball episode in a while, but, you know, Mai and Bulma dying or supposedly dying seems pretty dark. And let me bring up what I was saying earlier about Mai's death. They made that promotional art of Mai on it. They also, you know, made that intro with Mai on it. So, because of the fact that I saw that, plus the fact that I can't see a scenario where they would promote Mai so much just to kill her off before the arc really even starts. That seems kind of weird to me, that they would go through all of that just for like half of an episode. I can't see that. I really can't see that. And I also can't see the fact because Trunks, you know, should get some level of development with character interaction. So we already know he has a relationship with Bulma. That's his obvious mother. But with Mai, this is a person who they could really, you know, delve into giving Trunks kind of like a female soulmate or even a partner in crime, and to just kill her off that fast, I have my questions about it. I think she's probably dead just like everybody else does, but it's just kind of weird to kill her off that early. But obviously her death was a memorable moment. I kind of felt it even though we barely knew anything about her, and even though Mai was a villain in Dragon Ball. And obviously Bulma was a little bit different too, because she pretty much kind of sacrificed her life for Trunks in this sense. So With everything said, guys, I'm gonna have to give this episode 5 stars. This episode did a great job of flipping through, you know, both sides of the story. I think this episode also had a great sense of tension too, and that's something that Dragon Ball Super's really lacked, because with the Battle of Gods arc and with Resurrection of F, we knew what was gonna happen in those first 2 arcs. So there was no real tension because we knew everything that was going to happen. If you think about it, Super as a whole is kind of tensionless because we know at the end of Dragon Ball Z that, you know, pretty much everything was good. So if this takes place in between, obviously it has to get resolved somehow. But when you look at Trunks' time, however, the tension is there. You know, people dying actually matters. And I think that that's a great way to really, you know, show, you know, a beginning to this arc, because Toriyama himself has said that one of the problems of Dragon Ball is the Dragon Balls themselves, because they have so much power that it takes away a lot of the story elements of the characters. And I think that that was something that this episode really did. I think the tension really drove this episode to me. It's definitely one of the most memorable moments, and it's definitely one of the most memorable episodes of Dragon Ball Super so far, and it was great. So pretty much because of this, guys, I'm gonna have to give this 5 stars. Great episode. And for my episode 48 predictions, it looks like we're gonna see Trunks, you know, obviously going back to the future as we saw in the preview. Interestingly enough, he looks beaten up. And my thing is this, guys, I predict on the loop that some alternate presence will stall Black Goku enough for Trunks to go in the time machine. Why do I say that? Because I cannot see a scenario where Trunks, who seems somewhat injured at this point, or at least to some degree, you know, maybe not in the best of health, I can't see a scenario in which Trunks is completely eligible to go back to the present with Black Goku just sitting there just looking at him in the face. I thought that was weird. And for Black Goku's presence, I forgot to mention him, sorry. I feel like his appearance was really well paced out because of how well he showed up at the end with like the smoke revealing. That was an epic reveal for him, and it's gonna create a lot of shock for fans, even though we saw this coming, to see like an evil Goku literally staring at Trunks. So with everything said, guys, I predict an alternate presence will help Trunks go to the present, and that's the only way I can see it happening, guys. Black Goku looks stoked, and I am so stoked for this arc. I've never been more excited for Dragon Ball Super in a long time. The Universe 6 arc, in my opinion, was a letdown, but I'm looking forward to this, guys. So please share your thoughts in the comment section below, and please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. And remember, as I always say, to have a great day, guys. And for today's hashtag, I have the true beginning.